Oh, from New York, New York, you are listening to Extratime, driven by Continental from the MLS studios in Midtown Manhattan. I am Andrew Wiebe with my partners in soccer, of which Susannah Collins is now a permanent one. You've made partner, Susannah.
This is huge.
Yeah. And of course,
no pay increase with that, by the way. It's just a status.
Dang it, Gus.
A responsibility.
I just didn't want you to feel like I felt when it happened, where I was excited.
You're like,
it's not that exciting.
I'm selling it as a promotion. It depends on your definition.
It
Bobby
feels like
here as well, of course. Look, a big show for you today. CCL review. It did not go as planned. CCL Fever was painful, as it often is. Free spaces, of course, disappointment. MLS Week 3 is coming, and we're going to talk TAM, maybe some GAM, definitely designated players, and max budget charges with Sam Stejskal, national writer at MLSsoccer.com. Translation, we're talking money and how teams spend it, because he thinks you need to break your definitions when you think about Major League Soccer. Of course, who better to follow that conversation than Sounders president of soccer Garth Lagerwey. He knows a thing or two about CCL Fever as well. He will be in studio in the second segment. In studio, our first in studio guest. I can't wait for that to happen. Then we have the mailbag coming too. Do we have a highlight there?
Everything's a highlight.
FIFA ratings?
Maybe.
We
got an email about our FIFA ratings, and I'm the lowest.
Oh.
So we'll see if it gets read.
If we don't have time, it's getting cut.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Chop. All right, let's get right to it. And let's start with CCL Fever. As you know, we all have it. Every last one of us, right?
Nah.
No?
Nah.
No?
Not I.
What? Please explain. No. Because I thought that was part of partner status.
I mean, it's a thankless affliction. You said it's painful. Like, why?
Yo, listen, Suze, you can't show up on the show and start using words like that. You can't. No.
Affliction? Thankless? Painful?
I don't remember what she said. But
Yeah, Bobby, I don't know what you were reacting to.
I'll keep them coming. I just, there's not a lot. I have yet to experience the payoff for it. And so
there is no
while
payoff.
Exactly. So why would I subject myself to this and set myself up for what is ultimately going to be inevitable heartbreak? Bobby tweeted out something last night that I literally LOL'd at. He said, I'm watching the match, but also have How
to Lose a Guy in 10 Days on.
And I was
I know that because
basically
my girlfriend was doing the exact same thing.
I was basically doing the same thing, except I was catching up on The Bachelor. And I was like, this is the best way to consume Champions League, because I'm distracted. I know that it's probably not going to go the way I want it to, and so I've got this other, sort of mindless thing on in the background that I can focus on.
I get that. I think it's just a difference in the way that our brains process this, because part of my love for CCL is that I know that I'm going to get punched in the face.
What? Are you? You're just. It's masochistic.
It's a little bit masochistic, and I think of myself in that way. It's a soccer version.
I mean, okay, you guys. Every day in, day out, we consume sports, soccer. Heartbreak is a part of this. Like, why add more to your plate? Like, I already deal with heartbreak all the time.
Yeah.
I'm a Chicago sports fan too. Like, I know a thing or two about heartbreak. It hurts. It's horrible. It affects my personal life. And so I have to be smart about this. You got to make calculated decisions. It's a choice. You're choosing.
And I'm making the choice. It's a little bit like following an indie rock band, I feel like. You're just waiting for when they make it big. And you're going to go to shows where there are like 5 people and they might suck.
Yeah.
You're going to go to those.
But then
you're
can be like,
but then when it happens, you'll have all those memories built up and you're like, oh my God, there's 25,000 people here. They've got lighters in the air. In this case, we're lifting a trophy somewhere in Mexico.
I'm a bandwagoner. You're
going to show up when someone wins it. You're going to be like, I have waited for this day my whole life.
If TFC had won it all last year, I'd have been like, what? This is the greatest thing ever. CCL for life,
That's probably the right. It's probably the right approach.
It's the smart approach.
Because you have things like, like the New York Red Bulls, who were down 2-0 in aggregate, lost 2-0 at home to Santos Laguna, and then they go down to Torreon, and they're up 2-0 in 10 minutes. And if you haven't been watching, everyone on Twitter is going crazy. And I, of course, missed those 10 minutes. And so then I tune in, and it goes downhill, and they lose 6-2 on aggregate.
Wiebe lost to Santos Laguna.
That's
Andrew
what I'm
Wiebe lost to Santos Laguna in
a record, never happened in Red Bull's history. 4 goals in basically the matter of 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, that it had never happened in Red Bull's history.
One from behind midfield.
That it happened in this case in CCL in a competition they wanted to win that they had just come back in. And as you said, the final nail in the coffin was that midfield goal. It felt very CCL feverish. What happened?
what always happens. Back to Susannah's point. They came out with a plan to attack and get after it, and it's hard to, once you get back, it's hard to then shift your mentality and what you're doing to, now let's hold it. And on top of that, and we've talked about this a million times, Red Bulls are a little different because it's a pretty set roster coming back from last year with a philosophy and style coming back. But early in the season, your team, not everything's fluid. So you're thinking about things consciously, which is why you see so many MLS teams, I think, fall apart in the 75th and 80th minute of these games, because when you get tired, you don't have a system in place where everything is habit yet, and you're also not physically where you want to be in terms of game fitness. That's when things fall apart. Mexican teams are 12 games into their season. They roll through these things all the time. This is what they do. The talent gap does exist. And so that's where you see those things get exposed.
How much of that do you put on Armas? Because I was reading comments and it was like he was coming under some serious fire.
And I think he took a mea culpa on this one, where he said, yeah, maybe I didn't get it exactly how I wanted to.
And that was mostly about the subs and the changes in game, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, it was eliminating the central midfield. It was bringing in guys in positions that maybe as soon as the game changed and inevitably the goal comes, now you're not really well equipped for what's going on. Bobby, what did you see? Are you going to talk in this show, Bobby? Or?
Honestly, I got...
No.
I was making sure his mic was on.
You got that CCL Fever. He's a
He's
victim.
incapacitated.
I was hoping you guys wouldn't throw it to me on CCL while I write my
he's a
Nico
victim.
Gaitan piece.
Look at that.
So Bobby's out.
Look
Bobby
at
says
that.
no.
By the way, Nico Gaitan signed with the Chicago Fire.
Yeah.
So Bobby just broke some news in some way, I guess, on this show.
Well, not by the time it comes out.
Look, this is what we expect. And we expect it for a reason, because prior to 2018, MLS was unable to get over the hump, but not just unable to get over the hump, but probably unable to really compete.
So to Susannah's original point of why we do this, as a fan of Major League Soccer, this was the chance to prove to fans of other soccer leagues who said Major League Soccer wasn't good enough that Major League Soccer was good enough.
See, I'm just like, we are good enough. Like, I already have that belief.
But
in
I
place.
think that conversation has changed over the last 3 or 4 years. So I don't think that's as big a conversation now as trying to fight with people in the American soccer universe or American sports that Major League Soccer isn't like strong sport in this country. So those are two different factors, and I think the conversation shifted. So that's where the fever part, I think, now comes in, or has changed, is the fever isn't as much, or the desire for MLS fans isn't as much to prove ourselves to leagues around the world. I think Liga MX fans and Liga MX teams respect Major League Soccer, as does the rest of CONCACAF, as I think does European soccer fans now, or South American soccer fans in the U.S. So it's changed, I think, like the desire, the passion, whatever. A lot of what we're experiencing is residual from when we first started watching this competition.
I wanna ask a quick question here. So if TFC had won last year and then the same thing happens this year, we see the exact same results, like how does that change the conversation? Is it, how much does would it have been just a one-off and kind of like lucky if TFC had won?
It wouldn't have been lucky
year?
because what they did was not based on luck. It was based on going head-to-head with the best that MLS could offer and standing toe-to-toe with it. But that came from investment, right?
Sure.
And that's not luck. That's just money. We're willing to push this into the middle. I think the distinction here is at some point we are going to win it. MLS will win this tournament, and we'll all make a big deal about it, and we'll come on the show, and you'll celebrate, and we'll forgive you for saying you didn't have the fever. But it's the like transformation in mass.
Yeah.
It's that every team that comes into the tournament legitimately believes that they could win and actually get some of the results that show that. But
Sporting KC hasn't not won it yet.
I agree.
So in my mind, it's an MLS winner.
But that's, again, not in mass.
Serious optimism.
They're the
I love
only
it.
ones left. Like, we need to be at a point where you're saying every year, ideally, you have 2 MLS teams in the semifinals.
Mm-hmm.
There's a better than decent chance, and we're recording this on Thursday, and Sporting KC play Kai at home on Thursday night. They could not get through. They probably will. But there's a chance there won't be one in this semifinal. If you go back, there are 3 of 20 finalists from MLS. Just 3. And all of those, in some way or the other, are like an incredible story, whether it be the spending on Toronto's part in the fact that they were the best team in MLS history, the run by RSL in an era of the tournament where you weren't expecting from a team that you never would have expected. Same thing goes with the Montreal Impact. Right now, teams that make history or almost do are so far on the outlier. We will have made progress, in my opinion, where teams expect to get the semis, where teams expect when they get Toluca in the round of 16 like Sporting did, that they will not just compete, but conceivably beat them. progress comes in numbers, and so far we're not there in numbers. But look, over the last 2 years, after going 2-18 previously in two-legged affairs against Mexico, MLS is 4-6. So it's closing in. We're almost 50-50. We're nearly there. TFC beat Tigres in Club America. Red Bulls beat TJ. KC beat Toluca. Now, Chivas handled business across the board last year and knocked out 3 MLS teams. Tigres, Santos, Monterrey this year have done their side of it. It's going to be slow. It's going to be a progress. I want it to happen now. I hope it happens for Sporting Kansas City. If it doesn't, I don't think that erases that progress. It just means that next year is another chance to show something.
I also have to throw in that Atlanta played pretty well in the second leg against Monterrey, and you could say Monterrey was up 3-0, but that's like one of the best teams ever in Liga MX history. So even in losses, there are moments where you're like, yeah, this is CCL Fever too.
No, but that's like that's a little bit of like like logic doesn't apply. That is what CCL Fever is.
Yeah, that's true. So even in those losses, you're like, no, this team played better and they outplayed quality opposition with a new coach, and they don't know what their setup is, and they lost Almiron and all those other things. But then you sit there and you're like, if they hadn't given up those 2 goals after the 70th minute in the first leg, we'd be fine right now. Mm-hmm. And you still keep coming back to that. And that's why when you say it has to be like an overload to feel it, I don't know if it's ever going to happen because the timing of the tournament will never change. And even if MLS teams are toe-to-toe with Liga MX teams in quality, in spend, in all those things, I still think we're going to see that this is a factor. Mm-hmm. It won't keep MLS teams from getting results at any stage, but I still think you're going to look at it and say, well, these 2 teams are even. This Liga MX team's played 14 games already and been through a preseason. This MLS team is 2 games into the season. So even when you get to that point, I think then you're actually going to see even more how this is a factor because everything else across the board will be relatively even. The one big difference will be the time of their calendar that the tournament takes place in.
We'll talk to Garth Lagerwey about this more. Props to Houston. Well done. 3-0 losers against Tigres. I know that doesn't sound good, but when you're talking about a gap in resources, there was a massive one between Tigres and Houston. And to just lose 3-0 and to compete and not be, victim of the 6-0 loss or, just never even show up, not even have an opportunity. I mean, they played pretty well in both these games.
Yeah, they did.
There's just a gap there. It remains there as well. Atlanta, they won. If we're talking about progress, beating Monterrey, who had not lost this year in 13 games to the other 4 top 5 teams in the Liga MX, by the way, who had all had a crack at it, had given up 1 goal in their last 6. I know 1 goal doesn't sound impressive, but when they've given up 1 in 6, Joseph Martinez gets it. Barquito looked better. The tactics looked better. Nagby looked better.
Frank de Boer is going to show Nagby that video of that game.
Oh my gosh!
Every week.
Yes, he should.
But every week he's going to be like, "Why doesn't he play this way every week?" And be like, "Oh, well, we could show you a video from 2012 or 2013 of Nagby playing well because that's what Caleb Porter showed him every week and wondered it." It's just he has off the charts ability. Mm-hmm. His mentality of the way he plays the game isn't wrong; it's different. And every time I think I'm out on it, where I'm like, I'm fine with who Darlington Nagby is. He could be who he is. He's happy. Then I see a game like this, and I'm like, he sucked me back in.
With the beautiful little reverse ball, right? Like, who sees that? Nobody sees. He never looks there.
But just playing in the final third, just physically being in that part of the field and being a factor in that part of the field is different from what you're getting from him game in and game out. And we said it in the first leg. He turns guys in midfield. He charges forward. He's approaching the back line, and he wheels off to the right and waits for Mikey Ambrose to catch up, to lay off the ball. When your team needed something, it's just De Boer is going to watch that and be like, well, my system works because Darlington Nagby's this player. And you're like, if he is, then Frank De Boer is the best coach in MLS history. If he turns him into that every single game.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, Pity Martinez. I'm here for Pity looking a little bit more like the one we saw for River Plate.
Yep.
He tried some things. He had some confidence. It didn't come off in the end, but they got a win, and now they have an opportunity to focus on MLS, which they need to do.
Yep.
They got to get it right. So much money invested, so many expectations from their fans. I think did we say it on Monday's show? Had Frank De Boer apologized yet for his choice of words? Because we went all in on spoiled.
It wasn't. I think it was only Tuesday.
He pulled that back.
But to be honest, when I heard his comments, I didn't necessarily think that it was like this scathing remark or indictment against Atlanta fans. I didn't feel like he was saying like, you guys are all spoiled and blah. Like it was just, I mean, in a way he was simply stating facts. It's like you aren't used to losing. and so that I didn't interpret it. I am also not a huge Atlanta United supporter, so like it didn't strike me in the heart the way that it probably did some of those supporters. But I knew what he was trying to say, and maybe he was trying to save face a little bit and temper expectations. Because we talked about it last week, as lose your best player, new coach coming in, like it's not all going to come together. But
just bad word choice.
It was a poor word choice, and I didn't read too much into it.
So we got an email from someone named Gerard Pankiak. I think he says it's Dutch for pancake, and he said in the most recent show,
I don't know if that's real or fake.
you hesitated to label De Boer's tone and comments as Dutch. I am happy to weigh in on the matter now and going forward at no charge to you. What are my credentials, you might ask? My last name is literally pancake in Dutch. Yes, they were Dutch. Very Dutch. So Dutch. I momentarily mistook his voice for my uncle's, and he is, as you probably guessed, also very Dutch. As far as whether or not De Boer made a fair point, that's all for you to decide. Keep up the great work and let me know if you need any Dutch checks going forward. So he's saying it's cultural, though, right? Like part of that, and you saw when he said it, was cultural and not like language barrier, but where you use that in.
And just in the delivery, too. Yeah. That's what struck me. Is like you always, it's just so blunt.
Yeah.
It was just like, hey, this is the deal. You guys are spoiled. And I think that's why maybe this side of the pond, we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Coaches don't say that to supporters. That's not what you say. Like, find a better way to say that. On his side, he's just like, I'm speaking the truth. What do you want me to say about it? Like,
Tough love.
This is the way it goes. By the way, we are in the midst of one of the, and you may have figured it out by now, one of the most Extratime moments, one of the most Bobby Warshaw moments in the history of Extratime or Bobby Warshaw.
Oh.
Bobby started the show, said nothing, got up and left without telling anyone what was going on, and now we're just not sure when or if he will return. It is
I can do hand puppets.
This is exciting. This doesn't happen on This Week in MLS, or
Extratime Radio is the Wild West, which is why every time someone emails in and they're like, "Weeby's such a great host, he controls things," I'm like, I don't know. It feels like everything's going 500 miles per hour.
God, you're keeping me on my toes.
I mean, I got butterflies right now because he got up and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Hey, what's happening? Is there emergency? What are we going to do? I think what we'll do is...
Was it because I called him out on watching...
I don't think so.
Yeah, no, he's very proud of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a rom-com guy, TID.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the weekend. MLS Week 3. Matchday Central. Max Bretos will be right here in the MLS studios in Midtown Manhattan, hopefully not stealing my job.
Nah.
I'm real hopeful about that. Charlie Davies is going to be here as well. I will be in Cincinnati. Sunday, you can watch the pregame at 2:30 before all the games on Sunday. It's another packed Sunday schedule. And at 11 p.m. Eastern, the Wrap Show, which, as I've explained to many people, is basically what we would want out of a weekend wrap, and we're just making it. So if you have suggestions, takes, comments, hit us up with those. Let's talk about the Univision Twitter game on Saturday. Red Bull San Jose. It's at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. It doesn't jump off the page. But maybe it should. For a couple different reasons.
Yeah.
Tactically, it's really interesting to me because you have Mateus Almeida, who said, I am going to man mark. You have the other side, one of the most distinctive styles in MLS.
You also have
high press.
a Mateus Almeida who did it in CCL last year and drove Red Bulls nuts. This is his first time facing off against them, and it's at Red Bull Arena again.
See, gosh, that's what I'm here for. I think these little nuggets. Now I'm like, okay,
Boom, now you're in for the game.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Told you
I'm in.
That's what I do.
That's tasty.
I will not be watching because I will be on vacation, but you guys should definitely watch the
Good
game.
Good sell. I'm going to be watching for Kaku's body language.
Oh, wow.
Because his tone on Twitter, which I guess we're kind of in the business of reading into, was interesting. After that defeat, he tweeted, this is the translation, he tweeted in Spanish, sad when you realize you're not as important as you thought. I mean, that could be a lot of different things.
This is me
that
every
could be
day.
Interpersonal.
At MLS.
Whoa.
Boom. Looking at the manager right now.
Literally me coming in every day being like, oh, man.
I'm saying, you don't know when this was written. He's posted up watching The Bachelor, and he's like, whoa, curveball there.
That's what I'd like to
You're
think.
not as important as you think you are.
It's easy for everybody to be like, this is a Red Bulls thing.
Yeah, no,
this
I
is
think
a contract thing. But then he hugged Chris Armas after one of those first.
Could have been binging Mindy Project. You have no idea.
I have no idea.
You have no idea what's going on.
On that note, I don't think we'll read too far into it. Yeah,
I think that's probably smart.
I think right now they have no other competitions going on. They're finished in CCL. What you see on the field week in and week out is going to be the best of what they have. Now you're going to get to read how he feels in this team and how he can play with whatever's going on around him. So I think the next month or two, if you're a Red Bull fan or a fan in the Eastern Conference, it's going to be really interesting to watch him and see who is Kaku going to be for 2019? Because this is going to set the tone of who he is. And there's nothing else going on where it's like, well, we're not playing him that hard. We're not playing him full minutes. It's now, this is who he is. And it's going to dictate a lot of what the MLS Cup predictions look like this season.
Would Zlatan's health do some dictating on that? Because Zlatan's...
For me, no. For you, yes.
Yeah, that's true. Zlatan's not training. Hasn't in a week. He left Dignity Health Sports Park earlier this week. Don't know much. Know that he had an Achilles tendon injury. Not like a rupture or anything like that, but something that was an issue. LA hosts Minnesota on Saturday at 10:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN+. Loons are trying to stay perfect on the road. LA's trying to figure out what they might do without Zlatan. Because they sold Ola Kamara.
Yeah, who's going to score goals?
I love Chris Pontius. But
who doesn't love Chris Pontius?
We're maybe a couple years past Chris Pontius being the number 9 for like a top team. I look, Chris Pontius has a role to play in this team, and I think he'll find it. But if Zlatan's not there, it's a different role.
As Zlatan goes, the Galaxy goes.
It kind of feels that way. They went all in.
Yeah. And as you said, they sold off Ola Kamara. I just don't know where the goals come from for the Galaxy. And so this is a huge concern. Also, Zlatan ain't young. He has dealt with injuries a ton lately. So it's kind of, you kind of start to worry, like, is the all-powerful body of steel suddenly showing cracks in the armor? I mean, it's a little bit...
At the same time, on the back
troubling.
of that, there's no player in MLS that I would think could perform without training or being hurt like Zlatan. Because he's
a good point.
Gigantic. So
also he was not training and was hurt probably when he came and arrived and won El Clasico.
And exactly.
El Tráfico, man. Bob Bradley's getting in my brain right now.
Oh no.
I want El Tráfico to stay.
La Clásico, La Clásica.
No, just
all of you stop.
Throw those out the window.
I might.
It's El Tráfico.
Get up and walk. They're gonna have to get a new camera in here.
Bobby Warshaw leaves and it did go off the rails.
Yeah.
Huh? They have 2 national TV games on Sunday. NYCFC hosts LAFC. Cincinnati hosts Portland. NYCFC LAFC, I feel like, is the same test for DC United. Mm-hmm. We all have put LAFC on a pedestal and we're like, hey, they're perfect, but they won 2 at home, but they did it against Sporting and Portland, so they've done it against good teams. Well, now can you go to Yankee Stadium and basically like slug it out?
Yeah.
The field doesn't look great. The soccer's not going to be perfect. It's a little bit of a bandbox.
You're happy to walk out of there with a point, and I think that they can do it. I absolutely think that you can do it. I think it's a long trip, so the travel, the fatigue is something you got to take into account. Whereas DC last week had a quick trip up 95 basically to get there. So that is something to think about. But I think I'm buying into LAFC this year. I think they're that good, and so I think if there's anybody that can come into Yankee Stadium and get a result,
I think defensively they're stronger right now. It looks, and that's what you need for a game like this, which you don't know if they had last year in terms of grinded out games rather than blow teams out when the game's open and nice. And
they actually have a striker too. NYCFC doesn't. Bobby doesn't think that they need a striker. Bobby, can you explain that for us? No, he can't because he is somewhere that we don't know. Cincinnati, Portland.
And you better hope it's not something serious. Otherwise, you're going to look.
Cincinnati, Portland on Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern on FS1. I will be there. It's the first MLS game.
Are you excited?
Home game in the history of FC Cincinnati. I'm pumped. I've been dropping in all the DMs of the supporters groups. They've got like a mile-long march going.
Yeah.
We're going to start at the beer hall. I'm going to have Skyline Chili. That's been foisted upon me, but I was happy to do it. I just didn't know if my stomach could withstand it.
Some of the one thing I'll tell you, and I've never even been to Cincinnati, but I'll tell you this: you have to go stand under the Bailey at that end of the stadium, because Bobby told me this because he's played there. Other people I know, Red Bulls too, have played playoff games there. They say it's like nothing else in the world. It feels like the fans are above you rather than like they're actually coming out on the field.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I
tried to get a
thousand.
Bailey ticket because I wanted to be in. I wanted to experience it. No. Obviously, was not able to do that. And then I was like,
there's this carpetbagger from New York dropping in for the home open.
Yeah, I feel like taking that spot away from any supporter for any reason was a massive, massive mistake. Okay,
I agree with that.
Those are the games of the weekend. Quickly, before we get out of here, your ESPN Plus game. Give me the game and a sentence. I will start. Toronto FC versus New England at BMO, Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern. It's also on TSN. I erroneously said that there were 3 perfect teams left in the league. That was false. Toronto FC is one of them. I want to see what they look like as they prepare for the Pozuelo era and whether or not Josie Altidore at home is able to come back. So I'll be watching that game.
I like that.
Also, to jump on with that, well, I don't have it in front of me now, but Toronto FC has a really nice run coming up. If they can win this game, they might be able to go 3 or 4 out the gate unbeaten, which compared to last year would just be a miracle.
Yeah. What's your game?
Atlanta, Philly. 2 teams looking for that first W, and curious to see how Atlanta responds, especially after getting that win over Monterrey. I think Frank de Boer actually said he was like very happy with the energy that they showed. So maybe this is a chance to kind of turn it around. For same thing for Philly. Also, remember last year when these 2 teams played and Philly went down with like 9 men and Bedoya and Medunian got ejected. It was a very fiery match. So I feel like it could be a little bit of a grudge match.
No Marco Fabian to get fiery in this one. He's suspended because of that red card. They did not appeal it.
Incorrect red card. Columbus, Dallas, Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. These are 2 of the franchises that are changing their identity and who they are this year. Right now, it's been positive for both of them out the gate. You have 2 young American coaches, American-based coaches as well. So there's a lot going on outside of the game, and then on the field, Dallas has played really well. Columbus played their best game so far against New England, so I think they match up quite well. You have 2 teams that want to be in possession, that have a lot of young pieces that can cover ground, so it should be fun.
Bobby said Chicago, Seattle. So that's his ESPN Plus game of the week. That's at 1 p.m. on Saturday, also on TSN as well. We're going to break. On the other side, Gam Tam and Sam Stejskal, and the president of soccer in Seattle, Garth Lagerwey.
Are you watching the games or just looking at the stats? Email the show at extratime@mlssoccer.com, tweet at Extratime, or text the Hot Take Hotline with any questions or reactions.
And now an opportunity with his foot to win MLS Cup for Seattle, which he has done. The Seattle Sounders have done it. MLS Cup winners in 2016.
Back now on Extra Time, driven by Continental here in the MLS studios in Midtown Manhattan. The Sounders, 2016 champions. We're playing that for a reason.
Our producer, Anders Arhus, taking any chance to just sneak that one into the show. I expect to see that clip about 50 times over the rest of this year.
Garth Lagerwey, the president of soccer with the Sounders, will join us in just 1 second to talk CCL, to talk Defiance, that academy, the unbeaten start, Nico and Raul Ruiz Diaz. It's going to be fun. He's going to be in studio with us. But in the meantime, we have national writer for MLSsoccer.com, Sam Stejskal, Gam Tam, and Sam on the line. Sam, how's it going, man? Is Lyle at your feet or no?
Lyle's not in the room today. He's being a little too rambunctious, so I had to kick him out. But going well. How are you guys doing?
Good. That would have been better radio. I'm just throwing it out there. I just read your column here at MLSsoccer.com. Everybody should go do that. The title is Why It's Time to Change How We Think About Designated Players. Please explain.
Yeah, so for a long time, and I noticed it in particular this offseason, obviously we group all DPs together, but not all DPs are created equal, right? So on the high end, you have guys like Alejandro Pozuelo joining Toronto FC here next week. Total spend on him, if the reported figures are accurate, is going to be $30 million when you include transfer fee and salary over the life of his contract, right? And then on the other end, you have guys like Angelo Rodriguez, for instance, in Minnesota, or Sam Johnson in Salt Lake, where the total spend is like $2 million over the life of the contract when you include a transfer fee, sometimes there aren't one, and salary. And so that's just totally different worlds. And so is it really accurate? Are we really being honest if we're comparing these 2 groups of players and we're putting them in the same bucket and we're evaluating those individuals and their coaches and their executives and their organizations based off of that? Or should we kind of break it down a little bit differently when one team is spending literally like 15 times more on that player than the other team? I personally think, and coaches and execs that I've talked to around the league, think that we should kind of break it up a little bit. So on the high end, you have true designated players, right? With their salary budget charge, it's over $1.5 million. They cannot be bought down with targeted allocation money. That's guys like Pozuelo, like Zlatan, like Carlos Vela, some of the biggest stars in the league. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have guys like Victor Rodriguez in Seattle, or Angelo Rodriguez in Minnesota, or Sam Johnson in Salt Lake, guys that I mentioned. where they can be bought down with targeted allocation money. Their budget charge is under that $1.5 million threshold, and they're counted as DPs essentially as a roster accounting mechanism by their clubs. Those guys should probably be grouped with the TAM players, right? Because essentially they're the same. It's just an accounting mechanism that they're counted as DPs. So why don't we group them with the TAM guys? They're much more comparable to them. We can call them all over the max players. That's kind of what I proposed in the column that I wrote. And then you have them in one bucket, and then you have the true DPs in another bucket. And I just think that's a more honest, more accurate, more fair way to kind of assess how these teams are building their rosters and how these individual players are performing as well.
How does things like transfer fees affect this conversation? And then how do you look at it when you look at the future of spends for these clubs? For example, Alexander Mitrita coming in on a record transfer fee, but you had, DPs like Robbie Keane back in the day where that wasn't really part of the conversation.
Yeah, so that really affects the budget charge, right? So Mitrita is a good example because he's a guy that's, from what I've been told, is going to be making under that $1.5 million threshold in salary, right? So if you just look at the numbers that the Players Union puts out twice a year and you see him at 1 or whatever he ends up being, you say, oh, he can be bought down with TAM. Well, that's not the case because of his transfer fee. That gets factored in to his budget charge, and that transfer fee from which I reported a month ago or whenever he was signed, it's $8.5 million. That's really significant, one of the highest in league history. So when you factor that in with his salary over the life of his contract, you amortize it, he can't be bought down with targeted allocation money, right? So he would fall into that true designated player category. So you have to account for transfer fees when talking about this, and really they should be accounted for in any discussion about roster spend in MLS. Atlanta last year are a good example. I think their payroll was like 10th in the league if you just add up all the salaries, right? Joseph and Miguel and Barco, they're their designated players, but they weren't making exorbitant amounts of money in terms of their salaries. But where Atlanta was spending was on transfer fees for those guys. So if you include the transfer fees, which those figures aren't always public, sometimes they get reported, some is going, where the transfer fees are getting bigger and they're getting paid more often. I think that's going to be more and more important to keep in mind here as the league moves forward.
All right, we lost you for a second, Sam, but that's okay. We've got some more to ask about. I'm looking at your chart here, and I know it's unofficial, but it looks to me like, we kind of lived in this world where everybody's thinking, okay, 3 DPs. You want to have 3 DPs. And I know true DPs are a different measure, but when you look through the league right now, there are maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams that are actually going that true 3 DP route. Has the idea of a DP changed for general managers? Has the idea of having 3 guys that would be way over this max budget charge and over TAM, has that changed?
I don't know if that's changed so much. I think it's just mostly a function of how much their owners are willing to spend. For the most part, of course, everyone would love to have 3 star players, right? So if you can get those, that's great. And then you can allocate your TAM accordingly. But one thing that's interesting, and this could be really big if the league ever does decide to do away with a limit on designated players or do away with DPs in general. But if, say, they do away with a limit and you can have unlimited designated players, well, you're still going to have to work within a cap, presumably, right? So how are teams going to allocate that? Are their rosters going to be super top heavy, or are they going to kind of keep it conservative with their designated player spend and allocate it around on those over the max guys? And we've seen teams do that even now within the current system. So Portland, right? They have 11 over the max players. Valeri and Blanco are their true designated players. Lucas Milano is a designated player who could be bought down with targeted allocation money. And then they have 8 other guys that they're using TAM to buy down their cap hits, right? So that's pretty massive. That's most in the league. And they're able to do that in large part because of all the allocation money they got from the Darlington Nagbe trade and from the Fernando Adi trade. But it's also kind of an organizational philosophy too, right? That they want to spread that wealth around their roster and create a deeper team and a better starting 11 and be a little less focused on maybe the star power. So yeah, it's an interesting way to build a roster. And I think we'll start to see more of that if the league ever does shift kind of the designated player rules, which who knows if that'll happen. But, these things have changed over time. So I would be a little surprised if there wasn't a shift eventually here.
We have the CBA coming up. We will, of course, be talking about that a lot in the next year, I expect. But I remember sort of in line with that Timbers anecdote that you had there, Peter Vermees saying, hey, look, people want us to get that number 9, but we do spend, it's just in a different way. Is discretionary TAM, is that a way for teams that maybe aren't going to go that true DP route to believe that they can compete with ultimately the Carlos Velas of the world and guys who are making the big bucks on that end? How do you see discretionary TAM playing in here?
Well, yeah, I mean, that plays a factor, right? So if you're going to have 11 over the max players, or Kansas City, I think, has 9 or 10, I can't remember off the top of my head, you're going to probably have to dip into that discretionary TAM, right? So that can level the playing field a little bit. Maybe you don't have the high-end star like a Vela or a Zlatan, but, soccer games aren't won by one player, right? There's 11 guys out there on the field. So if you have a quality 11 like Kansas City does, then you can kind of level the playing field a little bit in that regard. Maybe more so than you would have been able to in the past before TAM existed and before discretionary TAM existed.
It's not black and white. Sam Stejskal is giving you all the gray on Twitter at Sam Stejskal. He's a national writer for MLSsoccer.com. The way we think about DPs should change. Go read that column. Sam, we'll keep following your work. Tell Lyle hi for us, okay?
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Big thanks to Sam Stejskal, always one of our favorites, national writer for MLSsoccer.com. You know this man, president of soccer, GM Garth Lagerwey, the Seattle Sounders. Garth, thank you for dropping by our humble abode here.
This is cool, man. I've not been here since you redid everything. I mean, the space is awesome, and what you guys are doing with it. Glad that you guys got a permanent set now.
I think you're our first live in-studio guest since we've come here.
Wow.
So you've made history.
It's quite an honor, or I'll live in ignominy forever. One of the two.
It's not.
I guess I have to root for you guys now.
I'll take that. You got a title recently. You're pushing toward it. We just got done talking to Sam about DPs and the different sort of buckets there within. True DPs was a term he used. Guys that cannot be bought down with TAM. You got the TAM guys. You've got all these sort of different echelons of spending. I wonder, given what I heard you say a couple, maybe weeks or months ago about that third DP slot that you guys have, almost like a flex, which makes sense for you given the summer moves you've made in the past, how you think about designated players as someone who's actually signing them.
Yeah, look, I think there are ways to make big impacts, and I think that for us, if we feel like if you build a team incrementally and with a long-term plan in place, they also have to be the tent poles. They have to be the major pieces. And look, these are 3 to 5 year commitments. And, I can want them to be available at a certain time at the right price, but they're not. And you have to be willing, I think, to have a longer time horizon if you really want to get it right. And, we've suffered a little bit in 16 and in 18 where maybe the team wasn't playing as well as it could have to wait to get the right guy. But ultimately, I think that strategy has been validated in that we got 2 guys who are pretty good, and they'll be with us for more than 6 months or 18 months or whatever. And hopefully we can do that again. And again, whether it's before May 7 now or whether it's in the summer, depending on what the market tells us, we'll make those decisions. And it's pretty good to go into the season where we have a pretty, in our case, have a pretty established team this time, but still have the ability to get better through this mechanism.
You talk about waiting sometimes for that guy. How big are these signings that you have to hit? How much more careful are you? How much more would you wait rather than a TAM signing or a normal squad player signing to make that one of your 3 DP signings?
It's the risk assessment I think that you'd expect. In the sense of it's based on the dollars you spend. You're going to put that much more into it. The process is the same. You're going to go through every step of data analysis, video analysis, personal analysis from a background, family, country type thing, but then you're going to have a different level of detail, and you're going to, if you're going to watch a DP, you're going to want to see 20 games of them, and you're going to want to put in the hours, and a lot of that's just our scouts are watching guys all the time, and a lot of it's just redirecting, and so instead of watching these 20 guys for one game, we're down to these 2 or 3 targets. We need to tell them apart. You're going to have to watch 10 games of each of them now to give us a truly expert opinion that being invested in knowing them. So I think that part is kind of common sense.
How has TAM changed this league? And I went back and looked at all the different kind of iterations of TAM. And it started with $100,000 per year over 5 years. Within 4 months, that had changed, and it was up to $800,000 per year. And then the next year it changed. It was 1.2. And then the next year it changed, and it was 1.2 plus 2.8. TAM has just exploded in this league, and it's changed, I assume, the way that you build teams, the way that you think about spending, the targets that you have available.
Yeah, look, I try when I talk to other people about this. When I talk to corporate audiences and things like that, when I'm trying to explain the growth of MLS, and I can say, "Hey, my team's better," right? But that's not that persuasive. Like that's my opinion, and I did it, so it's pretty biased. But when you look at this, you say, "Hey, the salary cap's doubled."
Anybody, anywhere who's a sports fan can identify with that, right? And we talk about growing MLS and who are we appealing to going forward, and we want to broaden our audience. And we have to appeal to general sports fans. So I would say the salary cap's doubled. All right, so what have you done with it? Well, I've signed more good players, right? I mean, and that kind of thing, again, is then intuitive. And you're like, okay, so when you say your team is better than the team that won the title in 16, yeah, I mean, we spent double the money. So, that's not a subjective thing. That's an objective thing. And unless I've really screwed it up, it should be better. Maybe I have, but it probably should be better than it was. And, we also want to talk about the growth of the league, right? So this is a really positive story about the momentum of the league, the investment that our owners are making to try to grow this thing. And that's really exciting. This is a really awesome time to be part of MLS and be part of, whether it's you guys getting a permanent studio or seriously though, right? I mean, that investment in infrastructure that we are here, we are in this footprint, right? And that's part of the presence of the league going forward. And we're taking root in all these markets. We've had huge successes with Atlanta, with LAFC. And again, I think on the business side, Cincinnati is going to be very successful, and they may still be on the field as well. But, when you build on those business successes and everybody hits, because I think Minnesota's going to blow it out of the park once they open their stadium as well. That's really, really exciting when you talk about a Miami and a Nashville and an Austin and just the buzz around the country. We talked about some of this is just a critical mass you have to hit in terms of just being on talk radio and being on TV. And you hit that when you get to 24 markets or 26 markets or 28 markets where you're now hitting enough people that they're like, okay, let's talk about this around the water cooler.
Spending is one thing. Incoming revenue is another, and we've heard Commissioner Don Garber say that MLS has to be more of a selling league. We've seen transfer fees over the last 6 months, 8 months that we have never seen before, and I only expect that trend to continue. In your position, how do you interpret those words, that MLS must become more of a selling league? Why would that be? How does it affect your job? Do you see a future soon where you're selling players in those sorts of high dollar figures?
Sure, I'd say two things. One is I would phrase it slightly differently, which is to say we want to become a bigger participant in the global marketplace, because it is definitely not just selling. We're not just fire auctioning our assets. The whole point of potentially giving kids a path forward to, whether that's to Europe or to South America, is to bring in another player of equal or better value, hopefully at a little bit less money, and then reinvesting that and growing the league. So if we want to catch the EPL, right? I mean, I think people for a long time kind of nodded and smiled when we said we wanted to be one of the best leagues in the world. They're like, yeah, that's really nice. I'll pat you on the head. But if we actually meaningfully enter the global marketplace and we're able to engage in the kind of arbitrage, look, and this is also the payoff for the player development, right? As a league, we've spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars at this point over the last decade on player development. And look, we're starting to see it in the U.S. national team, that's starting to get better. The youth national teams are getting better, but we haven't seen it break league-wide yet on this enterprise, but it will, right? I mean, this is a story I don't think we talk about enough. If you think back in 2005, 13 years ago, there were 10 teams, right? Or there were 12. That's when Chivas and RSL started, right? We've doubled the size of the league in 13 years, and yet the product quality's gone up. I mean, in any other league, that's impossible. There's no chance. You don't have a domestic player pool that can meet that. But because of the investments that our owners have made in this infrastructure of player development, we've been able to push some of these guys up. Now, is it where we want to be? No. But if we're a participant in this global marketplace, now more and more people are watching our kids saying, you know what, I want to buy him. If Alphonso Davies does well, if Almiron does well, like now we're creating this, and it becomes a virtuous cycle where we're all kind of rooting for each other for our player to go into that marketplace and do well, and then create more interest in our other players, whatever age they are. And so again, I think that dynamic, changing that dynamic is really fundamental, because it doesn't mean that you're, again, on the single transaction, it may mean that you're giving up a player that the fans like. But the big picture is much better than that, and it's much more holistic. And the whole point is that the greater good, you may sell one player, but the team, in theory, will get better. Now, again, there might be a 4-month delay between one sale and the next purchase, but that's what we're all striving for. And I think it makes the guys in my job, it puts a lot of pressure on us, but it makes it a heck of a lot more interesting too, where now we're charged with literally growing the league, right? Instead of going to our ownership and just saying, hey, I need more money. You need to write another check. It's, hey, how can we contribute to the strength of these franchises and the growth of the league? Because we want to be one of the best leagues in the world. And the way we're going to close that $100 million gap is participating in the global marketplace.
Take us into the conversation a little from a club point of view and what you do with that player development of what's the blueprint? What are the tentpoles that you have to hit in terms of, is it creating MLS starters? Is it a specific number on we have to sell this much over the next 10 years? And how does that money compare to investment in the first team squad? Because we hear about, well, Red Bulls and KC are going to do it this way and Toronto's going to do it this way. Well, what type of numbers are we talking about? How different really are they?
I'd say every market's different, right? I mean, if you look at the model we built in Salt Lake when I was there, that's different than the model we built in Seattle. I mean, really basic stuff, right? We had a residency in Salt Lake because we had to attract people from outside the area. And so we put them all in one place and kind of had a soccer, not just kind of, but I mean, a soccer academy, but kind of like a little soccer heaven in the desert. In Seattle, the commitment to education, among other things, meant that parents weren't going to pull all their kids out of school to go to one consolidated online high school, so it made more sense to have homestays. We still had to compete with New York and LA, and Seattle's not as big as them, so we still have to bring in kids from outside of the city. But like one of the first things we did was start recruiting from Washington State, like to say, let's just get outside the metro area first. And one of our really hot kids is a kid named Ray Serrano, who's from Moses Lake, which is a tiny little town in eastern Washington. So you're building in, you're building incrementally, you're laying infrastructure again, you're making affiliates, right? And you're making those affiliates meaningful, meaning you're not exploiting them for the revenue that they generate. You are going to them with a curriculum, you're coaching the coaches, you have people on your staff that are assigned to work with those affiliates, and by raising the level of the coaches, hopefully you are then increasing the level of the player that's coming through, which is then increasing the quality of your player development system. Now you structurally integrate USL with Academy, which we've just done this year. We have one guy, Mark Nichols, who runs all of the off the field of what we call player development now, which is USL on down, and we have Chris Little that runs on field. And so we have a really clear structure. There are no obstacles to that path of progression. We all know we want to get the best kids in the system up to the USL team as fast as possible to play for the Tacoma Defiance. We have a business partner in Tacoma who is awesome and helps generate crowds and revenues and support that financially. You line all these things up, and now you say, okay, what's the opportunity? And now we haven't connected to ultimately answer your question. We have to complete the last phase, and we have to then push them into the first team and not just sign them, because we got 11 kids signed right now to Defiance. They're under contract. But we got to get them into meaningful roles with the Sounders, and that is still based on ages. Is still going to take 2 years. So, this is similar to when I started at Salt Lake, at Seattle. Like, it was fundamentally stupid for me to take the job, right? I mean, they win the Supporters Shield and the Open Cup, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can do better than that. Let me start. And you start with a 3-year contract, and you're like, well, let me start this thing, and like in 6 or 7 years, it's going to come good. It's like you have to kind of have this holistic view of, but the whole point is, you in order to make it better, you kind of got to break it all down, and you got to say, like, player development's failed in this country for a long time. So we have to make it better. In order to make it better, you have to do some things differently, and you have to be willing to be patient. You have to be willing to take this longer-term vision and believe in yourself that if we do this right, if we commit the right number of resources, it will come good in the end. Now, what that number ultimately is, I can't tell you right now. But I'm telling you, we got 10 kids, and it's not whether it's one kid makes it or 2 make it or 5 make it. We got 10 legit prospects, 20 kids on youth national teams in our system. So our process is right. Now we got to execute the final phase. So we're in what I call phase 2, which is making Defiance really, really good and competitive. And then phase 3 is actually put them in the first team. But that's the process. That's the structure.
We want to talk CCL with you and, of course, the national team and Roldan and Morris. I have one more question on these kind of big picture topics, which is, where are the learning curves? You bring in TAM. Not all TAM signings hit. You look at TAM signings around the league, there's a good number of them that you go through and you say, that was a bust, that was a bust, that was a bust, that was a bust. There are a lot of hits, of course. The academy building process, there are hits, but there are a lot of points where you're like, oh, we didn't do that right, or oh, we just haven't had this figured out. Where are the biggest learning curves right now in integrating into that international market?
I think you got to be real humble, if I'm honest. I mean, we have to try to create this virtuous cycle where we sell a player, and then he does well, and then we sell another player, and maybe he sells for a little bit more, and then we maybe sell another player, and he sells for a little bit more, or maybe that second or third player comes in and plays for the Sounders and becomes an all-star with the Sounders, and then 5 years from now is an asset that's 5x of what it was before. So I don't know that it's a linear path, and I think we have to have an open mind too that some guys may go out on loan. That we have to look at this as it's not just a move from Defiance to Sounders type thing. But that said, I think we're moving in the right direction. I feel like I didn't answer your question exactly.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm thinking
it wasn't intentional.
There are a lot of failures still.
Yes,
and that's inherent in the process. Like those things happen. You can't avoid that. That's how you learn.
Yep.
But for you as a GM and as you look around the league, where do you think we need to continue, focus in and say, okay, there's a bottleneck here.
Yep.
There's an issue that a lot of us are experiencing. I think scouting had been one of those things. As more money came in, more teams built out scouting networks.
Yep.
And then the signings conceivably become more effective. Where are the little inefficiencies still?
I think we have to invest more. And my hesitation here is just that my fundamental belief is that there needs to be 24 different approaches to this within your market, within your ownership group, within your budgets.
So speak just to the Sounders.
Yep. So if I'm speaking just to the Sounders, we have made really, really good foundational investments in player development, in performance/sports science, and in data analytics. However, if you look at the global marketplace, we can do more in data analytics. That is a way. That is something that is very familiar to an American fan, and so again, very explainable, very translatable. It fits with the culture of Seattle. It's a very tech-heavy, tech-savvy audience that you're talking to there, and it's something where. Sure, maybe we're not going to be at an Arsenal level right away, but we can make meaningful strides, at least relative to our contemporaries, comparing ourselves, say, to South America, right? If we're going to move into this world of entering the global marketplace and we're going to buy players, say, from South America, at least in part, we're still going to hit and miss, but maybe with some better analytics, we can get a more objective view of those guys who have made it, or at least who's made it in the past, and try to make those models then predictive, where we say, this position from this country at this age, 80% hit rate, something like that. And you're still going to miss some of the time. But I mean, that's the whole point of when you double the cap, you don't. What's the other dynamic that happened, right? We made our rosters less top heavy. Why do we do that? Not because we're so brilliant, but that's what Mexico does, right? So I mean, you have more good players on those teams. So if you want to win Champions League, you got to diversify the spend, and you got to spend it on. You have to have more good players. And so I think if you look at a lot of MLS teams, I mean, if you looked at. There's usually a couple of stalwart American players, and then you have, between DP and over the max players, I think you have, almost, starting 11s mostly accounted for. Now, you may still have a drop to the second level, but hopefully now with the player development, now you backfill that, and now it's this combination of everything. I mean, we still got to be scrappy, right? I mean, we're not going to come in and spend $200 million, so you have to creatively get your way there. But look, it makes it again a really interesting environment to work in.
CCL, you talked about South American teams. Of course, we're competing with Mexico. You had 3 teams face off against Liga MX here in the quarters. We got 1 win. We did get no series wins.
Let me phrase this slightly. I'm going to come a little bit different.
Come whenever you want.
This CCL will be a failure until we win the thing. Period. Full stop. And everything will be viewed for the prism of MLS isn't good enough. So we need that seminal moment, right? We almost got there in 11. We almost got there with Montreal. We almost got there with Toronto. We're going to get there. We're going to get to that tipping point. If you look at last year, you can at least argue statistically that was a win. I think we won more games than we lost against Mexican teams last year. Now, we lost in penalties in the final, but, I think a reasonable goal is, can you win half of the time, right? Can you literally be competitive, right? So competitive means they win and we win, and it's going to go back and forth. And if you look at us in this tournament, again, just data, right? We had four teams in the quarters, right? So half of the quarterfinalists. Hopefully Kansas City goes through tonight, and you at least have 1 team in the semis. And look, we're all going to be rooting for Kansas City to keep moving and keep on progressing. But, if it's just Kansas City, then all right, so we missed by 1, right? And maybe if they're out, maybe we're not in the final. But if the goal is kind of to get to the final half of the time, over those 2 years, you're probably right around break even. And then the other dynamic that is interesting in this tournament, right, is there's actually more small budget teams, not small, but lower revenue teams in this tournament. Why? Because we changed the format of the CONCACAF Champions League, right? And so instead of the West Champion, East Champion, MLS Cup, Open Cup, we actually have 2 Open Cup winners in there, right? And so you have now Kansas City happens to be one of the best teams in the league, period, full stop. But you have them in Houston, which from a pure dollar for dollar spend, they're not on the same level of the Atlantas and stuff like that. So, if you look at, again, just data-wise, you want, in theory, the bigger market teams with the bigger dollars, they're probably going to, if you play the game 10 times, they're going to probably win more often than the smaller club. And I say that having spent 7 years at a smaller club. So it's not a bias against any of them. If anything, I have more admiration for what they achieve. Red Bull has been absolutely remarkable on a relatively limited budget, and it's because of player development, right? So, I mean, you get some of the fundamentals right, and you can absolutely compete. But I do think there's more progress there than meets the eye. And when we had this high water mark of beating more Mexican teams than we did, and we come back a year, look what happened. The Mexican team said, "Oh, we're going to take this seriously now, right? Look at the lineups that they're playing, right? And starting in the quarterfinals, like they're not screwing around. They're resting their guys in league play in some cases to play in the Champions League, and that's again, that's not immediate progress, but that's really good overall, right? Because now that means the Champions League means more." And it means it's going to be harder to win, but it means we're pushing them. We're making progress. And so I think we got to kind of see that along the way. Are we there yet? Of course not. Is there going to be some big inflection point where we win for the first time and everyone's going to go bananas? Yes. But I do think we're making progress, and I do think that being a participant in the global player market is going to help us in that regard.
We have to have Garth on every show because he literally answered that question perfectly.
I know. I didn't even ask the question. I was like,
we never even got to it.
I'm on the edge of asking the question, and then it just
Garth
tumbling out of you.
Knocks it out of the park.
One more before we let you go. U.S. national team under Gregg Berhalter. Has there been a change that you've seen? What's the future look like in your eyes?
I will say this. I love Gregg Berhalter, even though he was at Carolina the same time I was at Duke, same 4 years. So I forgive him for that.
That's like 3 decades ago.
At least.
Wow.
At least. I don't remember.
I know mine's like a 15 years or something at this point.
Imagine how old I am. I mean, that was even like pre-braids.
Yeah,
and
we'll wheel you out of here. Okay?
Yeah, exactly. No, look, Gregg is really smart, and that's really exciting, right? You got a GM in place in Ernie Stewart, so you have 2 guys helping, assisting each other with a good structure in place, and Gregg knows what he wants, and he has a system, right? And in the United States, you are not going to go into these games with the most talent. You're not just going to overwhelm people. So I think it's really conducive to a system coach, right? And again, Gregg's flexible enough. I'm not trying to put him in a box either and say you can only play one way. That's not what I mean. What I mean is he's going to select a way to play, and it appears to me so far that he's going to stick with it consistently, right? And I have no doubt he'll tweak it and evolve it, all that kind of thing. But by doing that, it allows you now to plug and play guys and to get guys who maybe aren't all European Champions League players, but it gives them hopefully limited roles and responsibilities that they can execute excellently and cohesively over time, which will maximize the performance of the group over time. And so I'm really excited about it. I mean, look, selfishly, again, we're the same age. It's kind of my generation's first crack at this, and so I'm definitely rooting for him. And again, I think, I just think smart people, you put them in roles, give them a lot of responsibilities, and they figure stuff out. And I think Gregg is well equipped to do that.
All right, we got to get you on a plane, I assume. Back to Seattle, Garth Lagerwey, president and GM of the Sounders, president of soccer, which I love that title.
All soccer. Just soccer.
Yeah, just soccer.
Yeah.
Just soccer. All right. That's Garth Lagerwey. We're going to break. On the other side, the mailbag. We'll be right back.
Are you watching the games or just looking at the stats? Email the show at extratime@mlssoccer.com, tweet at Extratime, or text the Hot Take Hotline with any questions or reactions.
Now Pedro Santos, his delivery, good-looking one, and it's headed in. Jassy Zardes from Pedro Santos. Columbus scores first.
Jassy Zardes getting some goals this year. He's getting a call-up, too, to the U.S. national team. All the coverage at MLSsoccer.com. Gregg Berhalter's first squad where he can choose anybody he wants. The European players are there as well. On Monday, we will really dig into that ahead of the friendlies against Ecuador and Chile. Let's go to the mailbag, Dave. 401-206-0.
Let's break it down. Apparently, you asked for FIFA ratings for us.
That was I was an aside. It was a throwaway
I don't even remember it happening, but it turns out that our fans do. Dylan McCabe emailed in. He starts with me. I'm not going to go there first. I'll start.
Who's top rated? Hold on. Who do you think's top rated? Is everybody rated? Susanna's rated too?
Yes.
Susanna's top rated.
Then obviously me.
No. Close.
Bobby.
Probably. All
right. I'll go.
Doyle.
I'll go.
The cult of Doyle is very
Do you want me to go ascending or descending order? Start at the bottom, start at the top.
Start at the bottom.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll start with myself. Unfathomably rated in the 60s despite his obvious real-life quality and in-game influence. The player who you always dominate the box score with, but every time you simulate, he gets subbed out in the 58th minute. I'll take what I can get. I'm a sleeper.
In the 60s, what's the actual rating?
67.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Weeby, 72, Mr. Reliable.
Weeby.
Every supporter's favorite player, the one guy your heart keeps in the lineup after playing 5 seasons into the future, regardless of whether his style fits the new look team.
That's probably fair.
That's lovely.
I don't know how
keep me
positive
around.
that was.
Keep me around.
I think that's
yeah.
really
That's what I was saying. I
nice.
had a little bit of both.
I wouldn't be mad at that.
Yeah.
Warshaw, 73, that marquee signing from a few years ago that you're ashamed to admit liking. When other fans bash him loudly on game day, you stay silent and never join in. Even when warranted, he's written in pen as a starter for as long as he's willing to suit up. Oh.
Key
Fair.
on the back end of that.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. As long as he's
Yes.
willing.
Accurate.
Ben Bear, 71. You're frustrated by how often his teammates shout him out in
Math is a little off
interviews.
here. He was supposed to come after you.
I know.
Okay.
Well, I
Gotcha.
was going in his
Okay.
order. And how often he gets a starting nod as you've never seen his quality and would prefer to watch a more likable player struggle than to watch him succeed. I totally get that, not on a Ben point of view, but on that type
Right.
of player.
71 feels a little high. You should definitely be rated above. Ben.
Weeby, don't appeal to me. I don't get that.
All right. I was just pandering.
Susanna, 78.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Really?
that's
The new offseason signing who hasn't yet been dragged down by the team's reputation. Respected and appreciated even in European podcasting circles, domestic fans remain hopeful her arrival will raise the level of the podcast as a whole.
Wow.
I think they're
Wow.
the shiny
I'm
new
like,
toy.
I'm like puffing up my
Yeah, their hopes are well placed. To be honest,
My
you're
goodness.
rising.
That was
The whole thing
tremendous.
is
Thank
just,
you, Dylan.
It's going. We're on the up and up now.
And we can close out on Doyle at
Hold on,
first
hold on,
glance.
hold on. Let me see. I want to guess what his.
Well, she was 78.
78.
I'm guessing he's an 82.
No, 79. So very,
Ooh,
just a little
okay.
bit.
Okay.
Okay.
At first glance, the unquestioned star of the team, but after an early season injury, see Mexican vacation in quotations, provides opportunity to lesser rated players who thrive in his absence. He becomes a squad rotation player.
I mean, Doyle won't want to hear that, but
Doyle will
truth
be
hurts.
happy to hear that
I
because
was
he'll go
yeah.
back to Mexico.
Yeah, that's true. That all inclusive.
Yeah.
All inclusive injuries for Doyle. That's the only kind he takes.
Doyle's just going to go to timeshare meetings 4 times a week as a job.
exactly. These drinks are free, right?
Yeah.
All of these
Drink
drinks.
in
right?
hand.
I'd love to buy a 7th timeshare. Oh, sorry. Look
Like
at the
a great
time.
idea.
Gotta go.
Adios. Back to the beach I go. Thank you for listening. A big show from us. Here's Sam Stejskal doing his thing, bird dogging around. Garth Lagerwey, our very first guest right here in the MLS studios in Midtown Manhattan. For Susannah Collins, David Goss, Bobby Warshaw, wherever he is, I'm Andrew Wiebe. We'll see you next week, everybody. Have a good weekend.